Welcome back to season 4 of Connecting with Purpose, where we're putting founders first, telling the stories of the humans behind the business. From magic moments to purpose, looking back on their entrepreneurial roller coaster to the possibilities ahead. We'll learn how these leaders have navigated their journeys up, around, and away from the performance precipice to achieve growth, results, and impact they're really proud of. Today, we're welcoming Adrian Bray, who is the USA CEO for Stellar Consulting. And Stellar Consulting help middle market companies through their growth journey to unlock their potential. That translates into productive growth and higher valuations and more equity at sale. Adrian did this because he sold his middle market digital transformation company a bunch of years ago, not really knowing what the process was like. And as he shares, it was kind of expensive, exhausting, frustration, kind of trialing and erroring his way through it. And off the back of that, formed a stellar team with Adrian and a number of his colleagues across the world who help founders and owners of businesses navigate this growth territory with intention. We met roughly 15 years ago, I think, a shared office space in San Francisco. We stayed connected. Adrian and I had a call a few weeks ago just to discuss the podcast, and I've been really excited to reconnect with him ever since. So very much value Adrian's insights into this sort of founder growth journey, which is the perfect focus for season 4 of Connecting with Purpose. So Adrian, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome. I've been looking forward to it. You know, that a little bit of that pre-game jitters as well.
Well, that's all right, because you know what the best part about that is? It just shows you care. And as soon as the whistle goes, off we go. So to that end, I'm going to blow the whistle and hand over to you in about 30 seconds with magic moments. But I'll frame it up really quickly. The magic moments are the 10 out of 10 moments that when you look back with the benefit of time, you'd score them a 10 out of 10 because of how you handled the moment at the time. Sometimes super positive moments and highlights. Other times they're really big challenges and even traumas that people have to overcome. But you score them a 10 out of 10 because of how you handled it and because of what came next in life. So the 3-part question, Adrian, is if you were looking back on your life as far back as you want to go and you could think of 3 magic moments, describe them to us. What was it about them that made them magic? And then if you could give them each a name, what would you call them?
Okay, so let's kick off with the first one, and I'd call the first one foundation. It took me a hell of a long time to get my first job. And, you know, after 9 interviews, 3 sets of testing, I got hired into this chemical and pharmaceutical giant. Many people know the kind of brand that came out of it, but at that time it was known as something else. And I got this role as a commercial apprentice, which basically meant a pittance for 2 years and prove that you're worthy. And, you know, why it's a magic moment is, you know, I decided to go forward, but they had an internal role. And much to my parents' dismay, I went for it. And it was actually about ERP implementation. And I've been trained as a global logistician, and moving from logistics, which my parents viewed that was a kind of job for life, to suddenly doing technology. And really, it set the foundation for my future because I saw there was a huge opportunity. I'm talking a time where you got a consultant for 1 day a month. It was, you hardly saw them. So for me, it was a great opportunity and kind of really was the foundation that launched. And kind of what further adds spice to it was that I got to see so many cultures. I got to visit many cities, not just in the UK. And for those that are listening, yes, I also talk funny as well. So that was moment 1, and it was really the foundation. It just created such opportunity and wonderment.
Love it. Number 2, yeah.
Number two is actually the birth of my son, and the label I'd give that is mini me. My wife just says every button he pushes is just me. So, and we've
Which
had our
means you
times.
get double trouble, double the amount of abuse, because it's you for however you act and however he acts, it's your responsibility.
Absolutely. I absolutely do. There was actually something last night, and she said, that's exactly what you would say. Stop complaining. So, you know, so what makes it magic is I have to deal with myself at these times. But that birth, and it wasn't easy getting there, and it was an emergency birth, but the key thing was, that kind of it created that sense of obligation that was far bigger than me.
Mm.
And at that time, I was in the middle of creating a business, and we had just won an opportunity where I had to hire 30 people to fulfill the contract. So my wife always looks at me slightly odd when I use this story, because she was in hospital for over 3 weeks, and so was our son. And that actually allowed me to work all night. Multiple times I was going to recruit these people. So it had both a pro and a con. And as I said, he is mini me, despite him being a Z-Gen.
Fantastic.
And yeah, the third moment I'm going to call resilience. And Mark, if you don't mind, I've got a bit of a story that's attached to this.
Yeah, please.
Now, Mark, as you mentioned at the start, I've had the opportunity of helping a whole stack of middle market clients around the world with major transformation, not just digital. And I'm also blown away that I've led a team of 20 plus nationalities speaking over 26 languages, most of which English was their second language. And I'm going to tell you now, very few spoke Northern English. And I continue to be blown away by the direct impact that I've had on the owners and their families, and about how I was able to achieve lifetime financial security. And on reflection, it kind of made me, your questions, it was like, as leaders, we have a tendency to talk about our successes and trying to avoid talking about the challenges. Now, Mark, I don't know about you. Have you ever had a major challenge that makes you doubt your very essence?
Lots of mini challenges. I don't know about. I can't think of off the top of my head like major challenges that take me back to the essence, but I think that when I have a major challenge, I go to my essence to get through the challenge. And that's, I think, having a lot of clarity on my purpose massively helps with that.
And that's great. Well, I'm going to share with you what started to create mine. So, what very few people know about me is that back in 2004, on a wet autumn day, and in American about 57 degrees, I met one of my co-owners of a business in a coffee shop in Oxford Street, London. Eventually got my coffee, sat down, and she was very, very stern-faced. And she slid a piece of paper across, and I thought, okay, is this I want to sell? I turned it over, and it was a bank statement. And it took me a few seconds to kind of recognize that the bank statement had only 200 quid in. And it suddenly dawned on me. You see, we trusted somebody to run this particular business for us. And they'd run it okay for a few years. But what felt like a split second, millions from our security, our dreams, our future was gone. And it really did hit me. Now, at the time, my head kept on chanting, and I can hear it now. It's almost deafening. It's all gone. And I've thought, oh, no, it must be a dream. It's all gone. It can't be real. It's all gone. And I just wanted to scream, what has happened in the middle of this coffee shop? But being Brit, trying to be a little bit cool, but it then hit me as I kind of walked out, kind of almost an out-of-body experience, because I'd gone home many a night and said today was a hard day, but I'd never had to go home and tell my wife, we've just been robbed. And based on my decision. Now we just lost millions. And I really couldn't afford to lose my family over this guy. As I mentioned earlier, it was hard to get. Now, my wife's commitment had been solid. We'd gone through some ups and downs, and as any business owner knows, it can get quite tough. But I'd never made this mistake before. Not something that could destroy everything that we'd worked for over 15 years. And I was just so consumed with anger, so consumed with regret. And the fear, it was almost immobilizing. Because I no longer trusted myself. Now, for the 30 plus days ahead, I could hardly look my family in the eye, especially my son. And young kids, when they kind of look at you and kind of go, what's wrong with you? Come and play. How could I tell him that what I thought I'd created was a secure future was really on a knife edge? Now, during this time, I was so tense, so tired, on such a short fuse that the staff kind of gave me a wide berth. And during all this time, I kept on asking myself, how could he do this? How could he rob us? Who does this? We got to the stage where we had to sell our home and really put the money in the business. And over the next 12 months, I spent significant time trying to rebuild. I also spent a stack of time trying to find this person. I found all sorts of people that could find people. And then as time went by little, began to build again. And something that I never thought I'd be able to rebuild. Now, this is a super shortened version, so I'm not, it's not exactly the way it all was. But what I'm going to tell you, I'm certainly not the person I was then. And what I learned was that life tests you, and you have a choice of how you respond. I mean, you mentioned about digging into your essence. I would say that that's where I started to realize mine. I also learned that you have the resilience to build stronger by focusing about what's in front of you, step by step, not trying to get vengeance. I also learned, in hindsight, we got some signals. I should have spent a bit of time checking the mail and not putting my head in the sand. Now, it's a tough one for me to talk about because it's not something I've really spoken about publicly, but for some reason, Mark, I thought I'd labor you with the of kind of breaking it to those who watch. Fortunately, my wife still loves me. She still trusts me. But it was only because I learned to trust myself again. And, that took some time. To your point, Mark, you dig into your essence. So that's my resilience story. I had to dig deep. The game wasn't over and I wasn't prepared to lose.
Yeah, amazing. What I love is you kind of you'd almost ask me for permission, right? You were thinking through this a few days ago, and you're like, "Oh, do you think it's okay if I like really tell a story?" That's the whole point of Magic Moments, right? To tell the story, and I appreciate you telling someone that's a story that's so like deeply personal and raw and everything else. But that's an exact example of a magic moment, right? Because of what you learned from it and how it's made you the person you are now, and all of the lessons that you took from it. The reality is, without those lessons, you wouldn't be able to do what you do now. And so I appreciate you sharing it, and I do want to dig into it a little bit more, if that's okay. Also, just thinking about your question, yeah, I was just thinking, I don't know that I've had a kind of a breaking point moment quite like that. I've had a professional one, which I talk about the performance precipice at Play Rugby, where I kind of broke down in front of my team because while we were at the peak of kind of our growth, I was just completely operating on empty, and what they didn't know that I did was I hadn't got enough money to pay my mortgage or payroll the next week. And so that was one, but you find a way out of it. And the other was the birth of my son, which was also very kind of emergency, traumatic, and again, you find a way through. And I think that what taking that second example, the resilience piece for me for that particular week was focus, positivity, and presence. They were the three things, the only things I could control: focusing on what was in front of me, being positive with this little tiny little thing that was on all these machines, and just being completely present. And that was the only thing that mattered. When you look back on how you had to do the rebuild, how you had to rebuild trust in yourself, how you had to make some really tough decisions to try to build up the steps to get some momentum to grow the business back. What would you say were maybe your top 2 or 3 things you had to keep front of mind, whether you were aware of it at the time or whether, now retrospectively you can think about them? What were the things that enabled you to lean in and build that resilience to build the business?
It took a little while, but the one was pure survival. And I hear you, because that not being able to pay the mortgage and the salaries was kind of why the house got sold. Because I was damned if I was going to let this guy win. I mean, kind of what happened after that's a whole nother story. But so it was kind of digging, as I said, step by step, and it actually led me on to personal development, and very much of mindset. Now, I hadn't played or was the athletic kid. I mean, I've been a drummer, played in bands. We almost made it. But I think at one point I played most of the northern working men's clubs on a Saturday or a Sunday evening. So, but it was kind of that. It was really that, I would say, digging in, knowing that this was just a problem. And actually, one of the biggest ahas was, as business owners, we're effectively there to solve problems.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it was cookie cutter and we press a button, it was all done, why would so many fail? So, and kind of with hindsight, I've started at 9 businesses and not all of them have made it. So it kind of, this one, it was a real dig in, and part of it is the kind of basis of what is that kind of the kind of stages of life, of kind of go through that, because that was just like running headlong into a recession, and suddenly the light switch gone. I mean, thankfully we had customers, so that kind of gave through, but we could have died from cash flow.
Yeah. Mindset. What mindset or mindsets do you feel you've developed and embraced off the back of that experience?
off the back of that particular experience, it was doggedness. You know, there's no way this guy's going to win. It was absolute. Now, what I'd also would say, the second part of it was, for a time, I was out for hunting this guy. And I started to. I spent some money. And it was like, well, you know, police were involved, and it was very clear they didn't care about the money. They just wanted to kind of, you know, solve the crime stat. And the person had a situation that it was clear there was not going to be any money. It wasn't as though he spent it on lavish cars. But it was like, okay, I can either focus on the problem, or I can focus on creating the source of a solution.
Yeah.
And it's very easy for us to kind of sit in that victim space. And really, you know, that's what also struck me is, okay, if I keep wearing this and keep saying, okay, the business is going down because of this guy, I'm just playing the victim. It was time to kind of not even play the hero. It was actually time to kind of play a different game. So it taught me that. It also taught me that I needed to dig into my relationship as well. Because we were always told, you know, we came from very humble beginnings. Go and build your future, be strong. At that point, it was go and get a job for life. Which, you know, my parents again were really dumbfounded when I said, "Hey, I'm going to launch my first business."
Yeah, I mean, well, I mean, I love the belief you had, right? You said it was wonderment and opportunity, and so you obviously saw that and felt some level of sort of energy and excitement and belief that you could actually have some success there. And I'm wondering whether there was a point in going from sort of what ChatGPT would say, to summarize what you just said, is from victim to victory, right, or something like that, right? But to get there to victory, you had to focus on what was in front of you. You had to focus on the solutions, not on the vengeance in the past, because you can't change any of that. And it doesn't mean that there's not a level of justice and prevention for other people, but if it was out of vengeance more than that was taking energy away from looking at what was in front of you to solve the problem, you're always going to be spinning your wheels, right, and playing the victim, which as humans we naturally do.
I mean, as you know, when you're a try down, you can argue about the cause of the try, or you can just keep building your
next job in rugby. Just like next job, there's a time to review your film. You accept what's happened, you don't ignore it, but you focus on the next job after that particular game. And this is the benefit of sports, because you actually get to review your film. You review your film, you do the analytics, and then you fix it with your teammates for next time, so the next time you make a better decision. But in the moment, you've got to focus on what's in front of you.
Absolutely. And rugby wasn't an option in the school I went to. That's kind of why I loved watching it when I moved down to London, and kind of where we live, we had a whole stack of teams, so it was kind of great fun.
Yeah, it's magic for that. So let's just take a step forward from that experience to fast forwarding to Stella, and some of your observations on that founder journey, whether it's your own experiences from known businesses and or from those that you've supported. What are some of the fundamentals, if you like, that founders need to be very intentional about to get themselves and their business through the growth curve?
Well, one is understand there is a growth curve. For some people, they're going to walk. Some people, they're going to jog. Some people, they're going to sprint. And understanding there is a growth curve is part of the thing. The second is kind of with that is, because of the pace and the decisions you make depends on how prepared you are for the next. And you can't avoid certain things, but what you can do is dramatically reduce the time that you spend. You know, as you know, kind of, it's very rare that, you know, certain games are played on a single game. Certain championships are played on a single game, but it's all the preparation to that. Well, it's kind of no different. So if I take the growth curve, is know there are low points, and those low points are about building. They're about building your skills, building your platform, building your resilience, so that you can then push forward. But that push forward, then, as you gain momentum, you can, as you said earlier, you run on empty for a while. That's your next problem. It's not you've done anything wrong. It's just another problem you've got to solve. You solve that, you get to the next one. So I often work with clients that are either in what I call, you know, an incremental growth phase. So they've not done major challenges, but they feel the business is slightly off. So they're just kind of in a groove. And I also work with those that they've gone through, they had some luck, some big contracts or something, and they've just grown really quickly. 2x to 5x is the common. And I know there's a common philosophy of 10x, but take through that if they're too busy trying to support the client. And then what happens is they kind of hit a wall. Just like athletes, you hit a wall. And I see it in professional sports people. They're on the top of the career expectations, and they're kind of moving, and then there is a defining moment. It's like they've just hit a wall. And it creates a ton of stress, and they get disillusioned. And again, you know, I've had clients that say, hey, could you get me back to when it was fun? I hate this big business. And that's because the business is now running them. And a lot of that is, hey, you've just not built the next level of infrastructure. What you had worked, but you've outgrown it. Best way I'll describe it, it's a little bit like as adults, we kind of hit those teenage years and we have one of those growth spurts, and our pants are kind of half-mast, and they're supposed to be long pants, but they look more like shorts, long shorts.
Yeah, so that I was going to ask, what are the causes of them hitting the wall? And it sounds like the primary cause of them hitting the wall is, for all the right reasons, they've been focused on the client, because customers is obviously the source of revenue and flows down to the bottom line. But what they've forgotten about is the things they need to do to actually support the future growth of the business. So the systems and the processes and the technology and maybe even the people, just to build up the infrastructure to support not just what we're doing now, but what we need to be doing 6 months and 12 months time. And therefore, because they don't have that, they start spinning wheels, getting kind of lost in the process. And as you said, the business starts running them.
Absolutely. I had one client that had actually bought a coffee shop opposite their office that they used to hang out there until everyone had gone and then go in. But so we had to kind of help him fall back in love with his business. But it is exactly that. Now, what happens if you don't address this, Mark, is the kind of why gets lost, because you're so focused on all these problems. You become the chief whack-a-mole officer.
Yeah.
And it gets toxic. You know, it's a nice word to say, but it gets really toxic because, you know, most people are trying to do their best, but it's so hard. The processes are so hard. The systems are so hard. But the challenge is you start hiring people because you need bodies, and you naturally attract. So that's why I'm a big fan of reconnecting to your purpose, and quite often your definition of your purpose may have evolved, and how that then drives the beliefs, the culture, what it makes to work. I mean, I recall on one of my businesses where we grew from 4 of us to over 1,000, I just really remember, 30 people, 75, around 180 people, 240. They were all major changes where how we ran our culture and actually how we described our purpose was the same, but very different.
Well, I'd like to dig into that a little bit because obviously you've teed up very nicely the elements of purpose in this, because in its simplest form, the process of people getting to purpose, whether it's for themselves or for a business, is a period of knowing. It is truly getting to know yourself, and that requires very intentional self-reflection on a personal level, and some very intentional projection forward as to what you actually care about and what difference you want to make, and ensuring that you're applying your best self characteristics, so your strengths and your energy, to making that difference. Same for a business, right? So you still have to go through this sort of discovery process. Now, of course, when you're really busy and you're bringing in all the revenue, and then you sort of maybe start to hit this this plateau, I would imagine for a lot of founders and leadership teams that it's a very hard thing to do, to say, hang on, guys, we got to step back, take a look at the big picture, and really sort of do a little bit of a refresh here on like why we're here and what impact we want to make, and to what extent we are aligning our contributions to that. So I guess what I'd be interested in from your perspective is, how do you, well, one, if there's an example that you can think of, again, from your own company that you just talked about, or from other clients you've worked with, where they've actually done that and what impact has it had? And then maybe, if that's the case, like, how do you persuade a founder or leadership team to actually just go through that process, to really ground themselves back in the purpose and the vision and everything, when they feel like they've just got to keep doing more of what they're doing to try to keep going?
Not everyone's willing to have that conversation. That's a reality. I mean, I'll give a story of a client, and we didn't go in there initially with the sales. We're actually, as a well-known organization, we'd actually been introduced by somebody to explore whether there was a strategic relationship. And I drew up the business cycle. And when I kind of went through, and stories including my own, the founder and CEO just got up, po-faced, and walked off. And I got a call about a week later that said, "Who's been telling you?" And this is from the founder's sister, who was also in the business. "Who's been telling you all our business?" It's like, no, no, this is a repeating cycle. Oh, and it was, it was okay. And what I was unaware of was literally, because there was another owner that was walking by in kind of in this open plan space that we're having the meeting. They'd just gone through a business divorce, and they had built a business very rapidly to an excess of 20 million, but they hadn't built that infrastructure. And the reality was the two partners were just like mum and dad, and the kids trying to work out. But what had happened is, because of that rapid growth, because that lack of infrastructure, the culture had turned really toxic. So in terms of that conversation, once they realized, hey, I didn't just make this up on the spot, there is a pattern. Thankfully, if I pick this case, because it's normally culture is not the first thing I start with, but in this case we had to get them to choose what was the culture, what was important, and get them reconnected to why they started the business. And that took 6 months, because this person was pretty raw. And so in terms of that conversations, where we got a chance to kind of show them some of the graphics, just simply because it has an impact, just all they've gone through that. I find those stories go through. Or the other case I've had is where they've had a mentor that's been through something, that big transformation, says, no, you need some support. Get some help now because you don't know what's ahead. But I know in my early 30s, as we were growing a different business and we were going gangbusters. I mean, we had the good wind behind us. All the sales were out. We're going through. We thought we were 10 foot tall, 6 foot wide, carry 2 heavy buckets, and nobody could tell us anything. You know, and we actually hit that wall ourselves, and we hit it hard. And so much so that, you know, I was out with clients a lot of time, but on a Monday morning, I was always in the office that one of my co-founders in, and next thing you know, tonight briefcase hurling from the door at me because of what I'd said in an email. It was a bit of a bit of hindsight, but it was just like, that's where we got to. And unfortunately, that's a lot of business owners just think they're failing, or they just think this is part. And yeah, it's part, but if you don't get help, you're going to stay there a long time. And, you know, really you were asking about that comment, having that conversation is, hey, do you remember when? We call it the good old days. And those good old days can be relived in a different way.
Yeah.
You know, and that's why I kind of like to play, you know, with teenage year, midlife crisis. They're all about, well, you've built a successful business, but it's now going through an identity crisis because more people, more clients, more this, more countries, more cities, whichever way it is. And I have no idea of what it was like in the old days where you all, you know, in my case, go down the pub and we could, you know, that was kind of how the culture was formed. We didn't actively manage it. But not just that, you know, if you're 1,000 people or something, organizations, even 50, 100, it's very, very different. How do they know how it was? And they naturally bring elements from their previous cultures.
Yeah.
Especially if they come from larger organizations, because the assumption is a larger organization's got it sorted. And often they don't. There was a reason why they left.
Right. Yeah. No, 100%. And I think the other important part this brings up that you've kind of alluded to through, you know, do you remember when, and connecting to why they set the thing up in the first place. If you actually get the purpose element right, like if you articulate it right, what that means from a business perspective is this is the thing, right? This is the thing that we are absolutely best at. This is how we uniquely deliver it. And this is the impact that we make. That, by the way, people care about and are going to pay for, right? That's the problem we're solving, is this. But we do it in this unique way. And this is how we're absolutely the best at it. That should be pretty enduring for a business, those elements, because they are foundational. What changes is the application of it over time. And to that extent, if you get that piece right and you step back and build the plan on top of the purpose, you've created a bridge to evolve over time, and that compass and the North Star element to why you're doing it and where you want to get to. But you do still need to be aware of what's in front of you and how to respond and prepare with different tactics and actions to keep things moving forward. And it sounds like, one, some of these companies probably didn't do a great job articulating that clear purpose in the first place. And two, they got so focused on the primary thing that was driving their growth, they weren't preparing to grow.
I absolutely. What I'd also say, and to your point, yeah, those things are enduring. But what happens is society evolves. So the form moves and you get stuck on the form. I'm not saying evolving the form just for the sake of it, but just because we did that last year, you know, what is the outcome? What's the impact we're supposed to be having? And, oh, look, you know, if you just think of AI, how AI is changing so many things at the moment is, well, that's a shift. Yeah, the form may still be a document, but how we get to that document could change dramatically. as we get bigger, managing different people, different management levels, etc., the form is now changed. And what I find is where people get really stuck and hang on tight to that form is kind of where it gets lost, the purpose gets lost, the culture gets lost. Rather than being enabled, it now becomes an inhibitor. So
yeah, and that's a really great way to look at both purpose and culture. Like they've got to be enablers of performance and growth and impact, not inhibitors. And there's understanding what to notice and what to observe and what to change that starts to become attritional in that environment. So let's just take where we're at now and start looking forward. Come back to some possibilities, either from your perspective for Stella, or maybe around one of your clients. Like, what are you most excited for as you're kind of looking forward through your client's lens or through your own business lens?
For me, I'm excited. I've got, there's a few things that are coming online. I've decided to stop my fear of being recorded. I've got used to my voice.
There's only one way to get rid of fear, and that's to lean into it, baby. That's right. Actions is the antidote.
Absolutely. Well, if you search around, you'll find a few places starting to pop up with no videos yet, but certainly the definition of a channel and things like that. So, so I'm definitely leaning into that. We're having some fun with playing with AI to see if we can kind of do some clones. That's early days yet. But also some pre-recorded stuff, some digital, because, hey, look, there's a great big world out there. And so far, we've only been able to impact the people that have been able to pay for proximity,
right,
to have us go there either live or in a video. And there are other ways. So for me, we're playing with that. We're kind of at the, if you're trying to learn to ride a horse, what's a horse phase? Okay, let's put one leg in the stirrup. Okay, why am I hanging down? We're learning, we're making mistakes, we're having fun. But it's kind of one of these things that if we don't start, we won't have impact. And some of our clients are asking us, hey, have you got things that we can pre-record for our clients, for our staff, so that they can see it? So it's just kind of pulling through and doing something to support. So that's exciting me. And I was speaking to a colleague of mine who kind of announced the other day, said, yeah, I'm going to start slowing down. I'm only 75. And it kind of struck me, go, well, look, but he's still doing personal exertion. And it's like, okay, there are other ways. And, I've got a little bit grayer of late.
Well, that is exciting, actually, because even just from what I know about the different inflection points in the growth curve and what those mean, and that there's kind of a formula around these things, right? Obviously, every circumstance and context and in industry and everything has its own nuances, but a lot of those fundamental elements are caused from similar things, and therefore there is an opportunity to digitize, share, clone, scale lots of those insights in a very practical way that's not just about building awareness, but actually about driving value and impact for your clients and a broader client base. So that's awesome. I'm excited for you, and I'm excited to be part of the small journey of having you lean into that. So when you're looking at that, and then I always kind of ask, well, what's the gap you got to bridge? Like, what's the challenge? Like, to get to that, to where it wants to be, to what the outcomes are you'd like to achieve from doing that. What's one or two biggest challenges you need to solve for?
So far, one of the biggest challenges has been time, including time it's been taking some of our outsourced resources. We could have kind of jumped on somebody else's platform and got going quicker. But we made the choice to kind of build our own community platform, our own indicators, which we've been doing kind of manually and so on. So getting that programmatically is taking a bit more time, especially when some of our vendors had to take some time out for personal reasons, and it's dragged. I think that's the thing is, hey, I'm a sprinter, and so when things are more like a marathon, I can get pretty impatient. So that's been the test. There's been a test of tolerance. Notice I didn't at the start give you a story about tolerance. I'm learning that one.
You're still learning it. You want to be running the sprint marathon, which is that you have to be uniquely conditioned to be able to do that, don't you? Yeah, 100%. So the value obviously is, yeah, we're going to own the IP, we're going to own the platform, we're going to drive the community, but instead of piggybacking, it's taking a considerable amount more time. And yeah, time's obviously important for these types of things, isn't it, as well? So last part of the conversation really is just kind of bringing it back to Adrian. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, but the first one kind of purpose related. Like when you look back and you've kind of thinking about when you've just absolutely been at your best, that there's often 3 or so kind of like common denominators of best self that's helped you through good times and bad times. If you could think of 3 words that described you at your best, what would you say they were?
Fearlessness, transformation, courage. Slightly different to fearless, but courage. That was the courage to stand up, step forward. The fearlessness that despite it's very much tied, but just knowing that you are going to be tested and be willing to go on the transformation. As I said, that other story, when I realized actually this was a kind of life happened for me, not to me, was a major. And you know, hey, sometimes I just want to say, hey, no more transformation today. Give me a break. But you know, as I say, I've been very fortunate. I'm sure my son would rather me not go through the transformations, because it's like, okay, son, here we go.
Yeah.
What about this? What about that? And he's kind of go, please don't coach me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
that is the challenge of transformation, and because to be honest, it's by definition it never really changes, right? It's actually about embracing constant change and making the best decisions you can and applying the resources as effectively as you can to give yourself the best success of getting to the next best place on that journey. But transformation is just going to kind of continue, so you've got to be strapped into the journey and ready to go.
Absolutely. And you know, with that is know what you can control and absolutely know what you can't. And you know, I do have to remind myself, hey, that's nothing to do with you can't control that. You can control what you do. So don't react, choose a response.
Yeah. Well, that's probably a nice one of a parting message to folks, because I just think that comes up almost daily, I think, for everybody. But having the intentionality to really hold yourself accountable to what you can control, so you can give yourself some grace and let some of the other stuff dissipate, can release the pressure and enhance your focus to actually move forward with actions and behaviors that are aligned to what you're actually trying to achieve, versus spinning wheels on things you can't control, which is so easy to get sucked into. So the last question, this is an impact question, and you know, we have kind of a me, we, world kind of framework, but I'm looking at the we, because most humans' impact happens through other people. Well, not just through, it's with and through other people, right? Friends, family, colleagues, that's where we have a lot of our impact in life. Work's a big part of that impact. When you think about the meaningful difference that you are making and want to make, if you like, how you want to be remembered in terms of the impact you've made to the people you've chosen to surround yourself with the most, how would you articulate that?
Oh, good question. That they've got the courage and they've got the tools to go on their own journey.
Yeah, I love that. And as often happens, our we impact is an extension of our best selves, and often something we've inherited and learned from other mentors and leaders and from life's experiences. But because we're so passionate about it, and because that's when we're at our best, it's part of the energy of how we connect with others and enable them to take on and embrace some of those elements. And that's how the ripple effect of impact happens. Just from saying one thing to your son can be a game changer. One thing to a client can be a game changer. One action, as small as it might seem, can actually be a game changer because people have the opportunity to take it and pass it on. We didn't use many rugby analogies, but there's one anyway. Or maybe pass it back, because we don't want to do a forward pass. But with that, because I was just looking at the clock, we've got less than a minute left. So I wanted to thank you, Adrian, so much for joining me, leaning into your fear, sharing so authentically and transparently about your journey, which is a huge part of why we even start with Magic Moments, and just some insights as well as to the client journeys that you've been through and how you've been able to support people. So thank you so much. Our audience is going to enjoy listening to this.
Well, thank you for the invitation. It's been a privilege.
Absolutely welcome, and we'll do it again.